We all know about the witching hour, but we don't all agree what time it is. Where I'm from, it is literally an hour, the 3 o'clock hour. So you have until 2:59 to get your behind in the door, and you better not step back outside again until 4 o'clock sharp. And we like to give it a couple of minutes of grace just in case the ghosts don't tell time. My grandmama used to say, "Ain't nothing open after 1 o'clock in the morning but legs and liquor stores." It wasn't until later on that my grandmama told me that the reason why they would say stuff like that was not just so you could behave like a lady, but also so that you wouldn't get caught outside during the witching hour. I really wish she had told me why. Tonight's story is a personal one of the time when I did not pay attention to my grandmother, and I definitely regretted it. I went on vacation to New Orleans. I haven't been there in years, and I decided to act like a tourist. I had been out all day buying pralines and eating beignets and going on ghost tours and doing all of the things. I was staying at the Hilton Hotel. It's a hotel that's nice and tall, bright red letters, easily visible from any location in the French Quarter. I decided to go out and have some drinks. Now, this is another rule my grandmother told me to follow. Don't drink when you're by yourself. Don't drink when you're on vacation by yourself. And I was breaking those rules. So I sat there at that bar and I drank and I talked to the locals and I talked to the people who thought they were going to get me home that night. I had a good time. And since the drinks were watered down, I could stay there all night drinking before I even felt half of a buzz worth having. Then it's time to go home because it's getting real late and starting to get a little sleepy, and I've had finally enough to drink. So I get off the bar stool and I decide it's time to head back to the Hilton Hotel. I open the door and a cold shiver runs down my spine. Something's not right. In fact, it's unusually cold. And you got to understand, it's hot as hell in New Orleans in the summer. So why am I freezing as if it's the dead of winter? Didn't make any sense. But what made less sense is when I looked down at my feet. There wasn't a paved sidewalk anymore. There was a wooden boardwalk, and next to that sidewalk was a cobblestone street where there was a paved street before. This is weird, but I figured maybe I just went out of a different door. Maybe I happened to step out into an alley instead of the part of the bar that I thought I was leaving. Maybe this is just a part of New Orleans that, never aged. It's a historic part. I'll just turn around and go back the way I came. But when I turned around, the bar was gone. Now, maybe I went out the wrong door before, but how do you explain the entire bar disappearing? Needless to say, I began to panic. So I did the only thing that a woman in my position could do. I hightailed it out of there. I started running towards the direction of the hotel, doing my best not to slip and fall and bust my ankle wearing a pair of heels. I really was not thinking when I went out by myself that night. I'm not even wearing sneakers. I start heading towards the hotel, and I begin to realize I should be halfway there by now. What's happening? And I stop and I look around to get my bearings. Of course, I still don't recognize the buildings or where I am. And so I say, well, let me see how much closer I am to the Hilton. I look up and I realize there is no Hilton. That big, tall building with the bright red letters isn't there. And I begin to realize it wasn't there when I left the bar either. Somehow my hotel had completely disappeared. So now I don't know where I am. I must have made a turn and didn't realize it. Maybe I'm so drunk I'm running around the streets like a mad woman and don't know where I am. Maybe somehow I just got lost. But somehow I knew that's not what happened. So I calm down, take a deep breath, and start to walk slowly. Can't accidentally turn down a street if you're walking, right? If the street begins to turn, you're going to notice. So I calmly begin to walk, eyes wide, looking around, making sure no one's trying to make a victim out of me. And then I feel my feet sink into the ground. I look down and realize I'm standing in mud. Now, there's no mud in the French Quarter, so what the hell am I doing standing in mud? And then as I look back up from my feet, I realize all the buildings are gone. I'm standing in a graveyard. What the hell am I doing in a graveyard? After all, the graveyards are locked in New Orleans after a certain hour. This one didn't have any gates. This didn't have anything to lock. I just kind of stumbled into some sort of old graveyard that wasn't even registered or something because it didn't have any type of protection around it. And that's just not possible. Do you know how far I'd have to walk to find a graveyard like that? So now I'm standing there afraid to move, not sure of what to do, when I hear a deep male voice behind me, and I'm really freaking out now. I slowly turn around, expecting to see, some type of nefarious person, maybe with a gun, maybe with a knife. But I don't. I see a dapper dressed man, dressed in white, big top hat, with tiny little skulls around it. And he's wearing white face paint. And that's when I realize this This isn't just any man. This isn't just some guy trying to get my number or testing me to see how drunk I am so he can kidnap me and traffic me. No, this was Baron Samedi. And now I'm starting to break down because I'm starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I died somehow. Maybe someone put something in my drink. Maybe I drank too much and I just died from alcohol poisoning. I mean, after all, I'm here in the land of the Gede. I must be dead. And as if he could read my mind, he says to me, "You're not dead. You're lost." "You heard that? I can hear all your thoughts," he says. And he continues to puff on his cigar. And he asks me, "What offering did you bring me?" "Offering? I didn't even know I was going to meet you. I don't have an offering for you. I wasn't trying to summon you." And he gives me this look that basically lets me know, if you don't give me an offering, you're not leaving. So I go digging through my purse, trying to find something, anything of value, and I come upon my flask, and it's filled with rum. Something I did at the hotel just in case the drinks were a little too watered down. Poured myself a bottle of rum into my flask so that I can kind of top off my drinks when I got to the bar. I offer it to him, trying to convince him it's the best rum he'll ever have and it's the best rum I've got, which it is because it's the only rum I've got. Now he knows I'm full of it and he takes mercy on me and takes a sip. Then he reaches behind him and hands the flask to someone else, and that's when I see his wife, Mama Brigitte. Now I'm twice terrified because you don't want to mess with either one of these deities. And then he looks into the flask as if he can see something like a movie or a picture or something. And then he looks up at me and he says, "You're going to go back the way you came, and you're going to make nothing but right turns." And I'm thinking to myself, if I make nothing but right turns, then I'm going to be walking in a circle. How is this going to get me home? He repeats himself. "You're going to walk in that direction, and you're only going to make right turns." And then he says to me, "When you see my brother, give him a sip." "Okay, I'll do whatever you say." So I follow his instructions. I go back the way I came and I only make right turns. And as I turn on every corner, I see that as I'm turning, the world is turning in the opposite direction. Like one is going backwards and one is going forward. Now I'm walking forward and it's like the scenery is changing, but it's being pulled back behind me, which is why I didn't notice it before. As you walk, the world gets closer to you, but what it was doing for me was actually changing just as it passed me. So when I turned around to go back, it was not the same place it looked like. So I kept going, kept making my right turns as I was told, and I began to notice that some of those places that have been there since, the early 1900s began to pop up. And that's when I realized, okay, this is some sort of time warp. If I keep making the right turns, like I'm told, I'm basically spinning the wheel here until I get back to the very beginning. Now I'm a little optimistic. I'm finally going to get back home. But it's taking a long time, and I look down at my watch and I realize it's almost 4 o'clock. If I'm not back where I'm supposed to be by 4 o'clock, I'm going to be trapped there forever. And just as I was thinking that it's getting hopeless, I'm not going to make it back, I hear another man's voice. And I turn around and I face him thinking, please don't let that be Baron Samedi. Please don't let me still be stuck here in the graveyard. And that's when I realize it's his brother, Papa Legba. He's standing in the middle of the street, or the crossroads as one might say, and he's smiling at me. Now I have to be careful with him because he's known to be a trickster. And he says to me, "You got any pennies?" I said, "No one has any pennies anymore." He says, "That's too bad, because if you had some pennies, you could drop them right here, and by the time you blink, you'd be home." Clearly, he knew my situation if he's saying something like that. So I try to think of something else to offer him. I tell him I've got cash, I've got quarters, I've got nickels. He says, "No, it has to be pennies." And then that's when I remember the flask, and I say to him, "Hey, your brother, Baron Samedi, told me to give you some of this. He said, make sure you have a sip." So he takes the flask, looks it over, gives it a sniff, takes a sip, and begins to laugh just like his brother did. Now, I'm not sure what's so funny, but I'm not going to get involved between these two and their little secrets. I just want to go home. After he takes a sip, he kind of thinks to himself a little bit, and he looks at me, and then he says, "Okay, I'll help you get home. But next time, do what your grandmother tells you to do and get your behind back home before the witching hour." "Yes, sir, Mr. Legba, sir, yes." He takes a puff of his cigar, blows the smoke in my face. And by the time I blinked, I was back, right back in front of the bar as if I had never left, as if I'd just been standing there like an idiot, just zoned out, like a zombie, trying to figure out which way to go. This time, I decided I wasn't going to walk. I hailed a rickshaw, hopped in that sucker, and had them get me back to the Hilton.